Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pie, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. Sophie Devonshire's career could be described as squiggly, but in business she's a laser-focused CEO with an infallible eye for marketing and team building. Drawing on experiences from Coca and Proctor & Gamble, she's mastered the art of leading with speed, building purposeful pauses into business and shaping roles to play into a team's strengths. Her leadership is shaped by countless pivotal moments, so join us as we discover how the Marketing Society's CEO shaped her entrepreneurial lens. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us. As CEO of the Marketing Society, I'm delighted to talk to you today about sort of the pivotal moments in your life and some of the things that you'd like to share with our listeners. So, Sophie, could you just kick off by talking a little bit about yourself, please?
Thank you, Dave. Brilliant to be here. Probably the most useful things to know about me are, first of all, that I am an acceleration addict. So I'm really interested in seeing how people grow fast, how businesses and brands can grow faster. The speed and acceleration of business fascinates me. And I am currently in a brilliant role for that. So I'm the global chief executive at the Marketing Society. We're a 65-year-old organisation, a not-for-profit organisation, and a global community of change leaders in marketing. So I get to work with people who are ambitious, who are smart, and who are interested actually in working together to shape the future, to shape their future, to shape their business's future, all for the better. And across my career, I have always been interested in brands and businesses, but most of all in leadership in business and how individuals can make an impact and make a difference.
And sort of tell me a little bit of how you got to the Marketing Society, because it looks like you've had a fascinating journey through the brand and marketing world, and I'm sure people will be fascinated to hear a little bit about that. I saw Durham and I saw Newcastle, two of my favourite places in your past. So how did you get to the Marketing Society?
Yeah, well, it did all start in the Northeast, a brilliant part of the world. So I'm a soft southerner and I'd never been north at all until I went to university. And like many people, I stumbled into marketing. So I was at Durham University and Procter & Gamble were recruiting. And P&G had a fantastic way of seeking out the people they wanted to get to interview. So they reasoned, P&G's promotion from within, so the graduate training is really important to them. And their rationale was that if people were involved in societies and in groups and clubs at university, then they were the sort of people that could get things done. So I was involved in quite a lot when I was at Durham. So P&G wrote to me and they didn't dedupe their database. So I got lots of letters from this packaged goods company and I was kind of, what is this? Not particularly in terrible arrogance, thought I'd go along for interview practice. But then I was incredibly lucky. The people who interviewed me, one of whom is still at P&G, very senior at P&G now, and is still a good friend. The way they talked about business, the way they talked about their work, was so compelling that I ended up taking a job at P&G in Newcastle, didn't quite know what to expect, and then fell completely in love. So I fell in love with brands and marketing and how the magic and logic worked. I fell totally in love with business, the role it plays, how to get it to come to life. And I fell in love with a person who is now my husband, which at the time was very inconvenient and has certainly led to a much more less linear career for me. And so Helen Tupper, who's one of the fellows of the Marketing Society, always talks about squiggly careers. And because I happened to get together with somebody who didn't love marketing and P&G as much as I did and decided to join the Foreign Office, I've ended up living overseas several times and having a career which has included classic FMCG, classic brand marketing, which I love. So Procter & Gamble was perfect for me. I worked at Coca-Cola for a number of years. I then went consultancy side with Interbrand, which suited somebody who's interested in lots of different businesses. But I've also lived overseas a couple of times. So I lived and worked in Dubai, which is a fascinating place to be at the time. And I set up and built my own business so that I could have a business that I could run from overseas. So I lived in Estonia as well. So those things helped shape a career where I worked inside big supertanker organizations, so big corporates, big classic organizations, but I also advised and worked with and ran startups and scale-ups and different types of businesses, all of which has made things much more interesting and has given me a lot of learning along the way. And then I was very happily working for a leadership consultancy, working with all kinds of different organizations, when a clever headhunter called me up. And it was in the middle of COVID, and said, there's this role going at the Marketing Society. And because one of the things that has been really important to me was the opportunity to bring people together, but also to share the stories of good leaders doing great things in business, the Marketing Society seemed to be a good place to join. That's how I ended up here.
I love it. I love the squiggly career. But if I go back to P&G and Coca-Cola, I mean, two of the best companies you could ever learn the marketing trade in. What was the training like back in those days when you started? Did marketing get the real sort of prominence, importance that you think it has today?
It was excellent training. And what it teaches you is a love of learning and an understanding that actually there are ways to get good at what you do really fast. Classic FMCG training looks at all the parts of the marketing model. And it also grounds you in an understanding that marketing is business and business is marketing. And one of the current conversations that happens a lot with the Marketing Society members is a pride in the way in which marketing can be the people-focused growth engine for business, the way it drives innovation and growth and flourishing for any business. And P&G and Coca-Cola absolutely got that. How it joins up sales, product, research and development, all those sides of it all. Classic brand management is incredibly powerful for all businesses, and having a sense of what that can do right at the start of your career is really valuable for anybody.
And do you think today, when you talk to young people who are coming into marketing, do you think they're getting the same depth of training? I was like you, I joined Kodak out of university, no idea what marketing, had no clue, joined a graduate foundation course, did manufacturing, finance, and then this weird thing, marketing, came up. And I just thought, like, that's got to be cool, making TV commercials in the winter in South Africa. So let's try that. And I've just loved it, that logic and magic phase you sort of referred to earlier, the sort of creativity. But I get a sense that young people today don't get the depth of training we got. You know, I literally spent, I think, a year training when I joined Kodak. How long did you spend when you were at P&G? Because, I mean, they're like the University of Marketing, P&G. It must have been a privilege to work there.
It absolutely was, but it was learning as you did the work as well. So I think you're completely right, of course. A lot of people have a very different experience when they come into marketing, and there are so many different facets of it as a profession these days. I think the thing to remember, though, is that while there isn't as much of the classic training, there are still some incredible opportunities, which is why I think good marketeers and good leaders, it all starts with a love of learning and a mindset and a growth mindset and the ability to make sure you're bringing the inspiration into what you do. So what we see with our members, so the Marketing Society members, tend to be more experienced in their roles, but they spend a lot of time giving back to the profession and helping others through mentoring, through helping with training, through actionable inspiration, and so on and so forth. And the conversations we have with people, yes, there isn't the classic training, but what an amazing time to be alive in terms of learning. The internet is your university. You can learn from other people if you're brave enough to ask, if you're smart enough to find ways to be mentored and to learn. And there are some great programs out there to see what's possible. Part of the challenge, though, and it's the challenge for CMOs as well, which is that marketeers can be anything inside an organization and can be asked to do everything. There's almost too much in terms of the breadth. You have to be octopuses and reach into all kinds of different areas. And for people who are coming up through the marketing career, often you might specialize in a certain part of marketing. But one of the things we encourage and support within the Marketing Society, and I know lots of people and organizations out there who do, is how do you get the T-shaped marketeers who can become leaders at the end of it all? And that's entirely possible, not just through your own organization, but through the mindset you have to read, to learn, to listen to great podcasts, to reach out to other people. And that really, really helps. So training doesn't have to be done at you. You can find ways to consciously learn every week.
And if I go back, it looks like you had your sort of first pivot point or pivotal moment when you left Coca-Cola and you came on to the agency side. How did you find the switch from the client side to the agency side? Was it a cultural shock? Was it very different? Did you just smoothly go from one to the other? Because a lot of people think about that and they all think the agency side is so glamorous or the client side is so great. What was your experience when you made that first pivot in your life?
Well, I'm very glad I made that pivot because it helps me a lot in what we currently do. Marketing Society is predominantly brand side marketers, but we have lots of senior agency people involved. And we know that lots of marketeers move between client side and agency side. I've just been this morning with a couple of people who've done exactly that. I would say I didn't find it particularly hard. I think that both sides, if you like people and you're interested in building relationships and you want to make things happen relatively fast, but moving in the right direction, then I think both sides work. There is definitely a difference, and I think there is still a lot of glory and fun and interest in. Interbrand is brand consultancy, so slightly different to pure play advertising agency, and the strategic thinking about how to build a brand. And a lot of the work I did later on was building brands inside out at an executive team level. I think that is absolutely a parallel to what you're doing when you are in brand management from a client side. But I think it certainly helps, and I see it with our members who've been both sides of the fence, the poachers and the gamekeepers, is understanding the pressure and the difference of both sides and the fundamental human understanding that you should have as a marketeer definitely helps with understanding the pressures that CMOs are under if you're agency side, or that what's driving agency decisions and desires as well.
And what were your sort of big learnings when you went agency side in terms of did you need different skills? Did you find your skills transferred sort of straight over? Were the agency people sort of, is that where you got your thirst for speed? Or talk a little bit about some of the differences that you found from one to the other.
I think probably the main difference when I went to Interbrand and then working out in the Middle East is working with different types of businesses. So Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola are brand-led, fast-moving, who understand, why brands add value to companies and why marketing matters. So there is often an education piece when you're in consultancy or in advertising in giving the client the story that they tell internally as well. Because making sure you've got the buy-in for the work you're doing internally is as important for so many organizations as making sure you're connecting with your customer or your consumer. So I think the storytelling and the rational business logic that goes alongside any kind of creative or consumer-led work was probably helpful. And the speed didn't really come from that, although, the speed for me came first of all from working in Dubai. So finding myself in a place in all its bonkers glory where people would say, let's build a snow dome in the middle of the desert, and it would happen. And the audacity of what was possible there gave me an appetite that when I went back to the UK, I ended up spending time with startup and scale ups and people who were disrupting categories a lot more. And that's something I think is really important. One of the things we do within the society with our events, and particularly our Changemakers Conference, is find ways to bring stories that expand the perspectives of what great marketeers can achieve. And when you see what's possible because other people have done it, whether it's with our awards, where there are always some incredible case studies. It's our 40th anniversary, by the way, of our London Awards this year. So it's going to be big, big news. When you see what's possible, what other people do, or when you have a story of a startup founder and what they've done to disrupt the category, or a great CEO who's taken a big super tanker and given it of an organization and giving it the agility ability or a different point of view on something, it reminds you what is possible with human ambition, with smart thinking, and bringing it all together. So I think that's what inspired me to keep bringing those stories to other people, to unite and uplift the people who want to make change, who want to lead change.
Have you found when you've come back to the UK and talked about speed and agility, and does that resonate in this market? Do you find people go, love it? How do you do it? And how do you become agile? And how do you have fast-paced processes? Or do you find you get resistance?
Well, that's what led me to write my first book, because I was working with big corporate organizations as well as scale-ups. And people were saying to me that, quite rightly, this is a fantastic time to be in business because you can make things happen so fast. Websites can be launched with a blink of an eye. Products can be rolled out, incredibly rapidly now. You can really, really make things happen at a very exciting pace. But the leaders of those businesses were also saying to me, but Sophie, my organization is so slow, or my team don't get it. How do we speed things up? How do we make things happen? And at the same time, they were also saying, and people are saying this even more now, it's pretty overwhelming, an always on culture, and that relentless pace can be exhausting as well as exhilarating. How do you cope as a leader? How do you cope as someone who's ambitious, but, only human? So I realized that there was something that people wanted to find out more about. So I decided to research it, to spend time with, I spoke to 100 different leaders of all kinds of businesses around the world to talk about pace setting. How do you get the right pace in your organization? How do you move not just super fast and relentlessly at speed, but with velocity, which purely and simply is speed in the right direction? So I'm also really interested, and what the research for my book, Super Fast, Lead at Speed, did was to look at that kind of 21st century leadership that's needed now. So you can't just scream if you want to go faster. Some people are still doing it, but it isn't as effective to have command and control. You need to trust and inspire. You don't just tell people what to do, you need to storytell. So I was interested in those people who wanted to be responsive and move fast and compete with their competition and make things happen, but also responsible. So who are building brands and businesses and organizations with legacy that last, that bring, dignity to what's going on and can have sustainable leadership and success. How do you get that pace right to make it happen, but also make it last? So that's what fascinates me right now and has done since I've written the book, and I've been speaking about this around the world.
And without giving all the tips away in the book, are there one or two things, if somebody's listening to this and they're resonating and I need to get my business moving faster, we can definitely buy the book. But what sort of things you would say you've got to think about this first. Where do you start when you start to bring the right pace, the right velocity, agile processes into your businesses? Because it sounds fantastic, but it's hard to get people to move at pace when they don't want to move at pace. It's not easy.
It is really hard. And thank you for the book plug. There are certainly a lot of things in there and a lot of stories which help pull it together. And one of the things that we did differently with the book when I put it together was at the end of every chapter, there is also espresso takeaways so that people could read in a page the whole chapter if they were impatient readers and they really couldn't do it. But I'll try and pull out a few things that I think are useful. There's a lot of personal thinking that comes out of the book. So I spoke to people who were leading big global organizations as well as tech startups. I spoke to the head of the Joint Intelligence for the Counterterrorism Unit. So, try saving the world from terrorism and doing that super fast. That's definitely more than you've probably got on your to-do list. All kinds of different people. And the only thing that all successful people have in common is that they're successful, right? But there were some tips and tools that they tried which help speed up other people's thinking. So you mentioned, Dave, the idea of, when other people don't want to go as fast. And that's a very common challenge. So CEOs, founders, CMOs, there are often a lot of people who love the thrill of change, of making things happen. And they're the pace setters. And they probably have a lot of energy to do that. And getting everybody else to move at the same speed is challenging. But there are ways. So there are giving people the frameworks to help them get there, structuring for speed. There's mindsets that can be helped. But you can't do that if you aren't able to have your own resilience as you go through it, because all these great pace setters put a lot of pressure on themselves as well. And the world is complex. So one of the big things that came out from the book was an understanding of how to lead at speed when you are that leader. And energy is at the heart of everything. Energy is what you need. So there are some very practical tips in there about how do you sustain the energy that you need to be that pace setter, but also how do you nurture and support the energy that is there inside your businesses. So, marketing and advertising and PR and the creative industries, creativity can drive that energy. Culture can drive it. And the structures and ways and the pace setting. So I talk a lot about pace setting, by which I mean variable pace as well. So of course you want to go fast, but understanding the power of the pause when you're an impatient leader, building in the pause into your speaking, building into the pause into your thinking. The pre-mortem at the start of a project is a brilliant time to work out what's going to go wrong. Building in a pause halfway through so you can see if you're on track. Building in a pause at the end of what's happened so you can do fast feedback. Using those pauses and building those pauses into your week and into your team's year as well. When do you have the reset? When do you recharge? When do you recalibrate? Building in those pauses so that the pace setting is variable. In the same way as in sports performance, everybody knows that those rest days are important. Making sure you've got that smart pace setting with pauses. You basically have an issue as well. If you've got somebody who's ambitious, if you say, we're going too fast, we've got to slow down, or we've got to go slow to go fast, even the word slow or the word stop can be a challenge if you're ambitious. But strategic pauses, a fantastic way to get the pace right and make sure you are working in a way that will last.
Yeah, that makes huge sense to me. I'm a huge fan of the short time out where you actually do encourage people to just reflect, think, what have we achieved over the last 18 months, 2 years? Not enough time, I think, is spent in reflection. And the other thing I encourage people to do, everybody has a to-do list, but I have a not to-do list. And, I make it really clear we're not going to do this. Because every you're a chief executive, every issue in your business. And all 60 problems or 80 problems or 80 challenges. but you've figured out which 6 are the priority for now. But half your organisation's saying, well, what about number 65? Or what about number 55? Or what about number 35? So getting clarity on what you're not going to tackle, I think it is potentially an interesting way of unlocking speed. I hadn't thought about it until you started talking then, but I would love your sort of take on whether sharing what you're not going to do is important as well.
Well, so three really big thoughts in what you've just said there, Dave. So the first bit about reflection and seeing how far you've come for 18 months. What we saw and what we continue to see with lots of people in the research and everything I see with Marketing Society members and with what we're doing is that actually progress drives pace. So if you're the type of leader who's constantly going, come on, more, we need to go faster, we've got to do more, we've got to do better, actually what you lose is the momentum of things improving. So if you're celebrating how far you've come, that can be really helpful in keeping the energy up for the journey. So the reflection on what's happened, which also links to your to-do list and not to do. There is a third bit in there, which is what I like to call the to-do list. Mm-hmm. Actually, when you go, we've done that, we've achieved that can move you on. But absolutely. So writing the book, which was, a very important pivot point for me, I discovered that actually, having read many books in my life and having written blogs and all these other things, I thought, how hard can it be? But like a lot of people who want to have written a book, actually writing it is hard. But the really, really absolute killer bit in writing a book is the editing. And the same thing is in leadership. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Anna Wintour always talks about, leadership is not just about the ideas, it's about getting things done. And you need to purge, prioritize, curate, edit all those ideas, all that potential to get it into what really is the priority list, as you say. And absolutely, we are never going to do that. So there's some decisions we've made. There are so many amazing opportunities for the Marketing Society, but there are some things we will not do. They don't fit with our mission. They aren't the priority. So they're on the to-don't list. However, the other thing you can also look at when you're going through that, so doing that if you're with an exec team and you're looking at all these great ideas, is the later list. So not now, maybe later. So the sequencing of what you want to do can also help when there are lots of ideas. There's a fantastic story about Warren Buffett's pilot. So Mark Flynn, who flew a plane for Warren Buffett for ages, asked him for some advice when he was wanting to move on. And Warren made him, write down all his dreams and his goals and his priorities. And he did this, and he came back to him and went, yeah, this is really helpful. I've written it down. I've got clarity. So yeah, I'm going to start at the top and work, and I put them in order and work my way through, and Warren went, well, so what are your three most important things? He went, oh yeah, let's prioritize. Those are those 3. So I'm going to start with those 3. And Warren Buffett said, no, you don't get it. You've got those 3 things. Everything else on the list now becomes your avoid at all cost list. Because as soon as you get into anything like that, you can't focus in on what needs to happen. And that, I struggle with this, everybody struggles with this, when you've got lots of great ideas and fun things to do, working out the sequence in which you do them and prioritizing and editing is the hardest bit.
And do you find that you then share that with your leadership team or your whole organization so that they're aligned with your thinking?
Well, we work on it together because I'm terrible at it. I'm a popcorn machine of, these are all the exciting things that we should work on. So we work together and go, right, well, what are we going to do now? Here's the framework we've set up. What is the most important thing against that? How are we going to progress that? Yeah, that's fine. And what I encourage them to do is be really candid and open with me when I come back and go, this is fun. To go, right, we've agreed this, therefore we're going to do it later. And I actually test them quite a lot with that because it's really important for them to hold on to the structure and make sure that that's the and that I think having a good leadership team and a good exec who have different roles around that is really, really important. Who are the starters? Who are the finishers? Who are going to make sure that things actually happen and that things are prioritized?
Mm. And I mean, coming back to sort of building a leadership team, how much time do you think leaders should spend on working with their immediate team, making sure that they have understood their own weaknesses and compensate for their own weaknesses with the different types of people put around? Do you spend a lot of time now you're a recognized leader thinking about that and guiding others?
It's incredibly important, this conversation. I'd start with the data that's out there. So Google, who are obviously love a bit of research, their rework piece, so Project Aristotle, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, is really valuable for this. So if you want to build a super team, looking at the work they've done on that, I think is absolutely foundational. But what comes out of that is a very clear finding that it isn't who's on your team that matters, it's how they work together. So yes, I completely agree with Matt. Finding the right people and the cast and how the chemistry works together is magic, and it's brilliant to do it. But there's something about looking at that. If you were handed a cast straight away, which lots of people are, looking at how they work together and working on that gives you the real magic. So we talked about pace, and that's the bit where you slow down. You slow down to understand, how is this person motivated? What are they like when they're at their best? How do we give them the role and shaping? For me, I'm a big believer in shaping roles as much as you can to build on people's strengths. So not wasting time, trying to build up things where people are terribly, terribly weak. So Anne Bowden, who's one of my super fast interviewees, who's the founder of Starling Bank, talks about unbalanced people and deliberately hiring unbalanced people who are really good at one thing. So building up that team, so you've got complementary skills and attitudes, and that people are building on their strengths. Because you see how motivated and energized people are if you can allow them to build on their skills and their strengths and their values and the things that they love, and really pushing that, and then building the structure so it works around it. But then also how that team works together. So the purpose, the clarity of vision, making sure that there's the same high bar for everybody on that team so that people feel comfortable with that. The learning's out there, the research has been done about how to build up that team. But it's also one of those classic things that takes time. So building in the space to break bread together, to do exercises where you get to understand each other as people, where you really allow the individuals to have, whether it's coaching or mentoring or just time to reflect on how they work. In the same way as if we were all machines, we'd understand how we worked. We need to understand as individuals, as leaders, how we work and how we work at our best in order to set things up to make success better and to make people. My second book was called Love Work, which I wrote with a great performance coach, Ben Renshaw. And we spend 90,000 hours of our one wild and precious life at work day. Why would we not set it up so that people can enjoy it as much as possible, and so that we as individuals can make the most of it?
Yeah, I'm a great fan of the concept of love work. And, as I've said to my kids since they were about 4, find something you love doing and then figure out how to make a living from it. Don't do it the other way around. That they've all followed pretty much that sort of thought process. And I find it very frustrating when I see, a person who goes into a job clearly doesn't love what they do, and you sort of want to help them. And I have a simple statement I say to all my people: you've got to take responsibility for managing your own destiny. It's hard. It's really hard. But if you manage your own destiny and take responsibility for your own career, you can't go, well, I don't like it. You've got it. Almost forces you into that love work space. And so I'd love to get your perspective on how you get to a point in your life where you love work, because everybody should have the privilege and the enjoyment of just going to work and loving what they do, no matter what job they do, because it's like you say, it's 90,000 hours of your life. It's probably 50 years in total. I don't know what 90,000 hours translates to in years, but I bet it must be a massive amount. But what did you learn from sort of your work on the second book?
It was fascinating. So I mean, let's start with it was a tongue-in-cheek little bit as a title, because work isn't something that work is often not as much fun as some of the things you do outside of work, and there will always be times when it is challenging. And a lot of people do end up doing roles that they stay in, even though they don't love every second of it, because there are financial pressures, because they have responsibilities or whatever. But I think it is very helpful to think about it as parallel to relationships. So I love your destiny point. So we have values and principles in the Marketing Society that as a team we worked on together, looking at when we're at our best. And one of those is a very simple own your own journey statement, for exactly that reason. I can't possibly know what a member of my team really wants out of work. It will be different to me. So the ability to own it and shape it is really important. And the same in relationships. You have to have two individuals coming together in positive relationships, whether they're romantic relationships or friendships or whatever, where they as individuals understand what they want and need and can work on that together and communicate it. It is not the responsibility of the workplace and the organisation to make everything perfect and make everything right and make everything in a way to make that person happy, the employee happy. The employee has to be able to communicate, has to be able to work out how to shape it. Otherwise, it's a parent-child relationship, which isn't as healthy as well. So I think there is a lot that can be done. And I'm slightly nervous of the kind of follow your passion piece as well. I didn't go into my first job because I thought I'd love it. I went into it because I wanted to repay my student debt. And it was there and it looked interesting. And then I fell in love with it. And then I realized it was interesting. And if I had followed, my passion for the theatre, I would have ended up in a very, very different role. But I think there is a way of finding love in what you do and I think that business can bring purpose and dignity and wealth to people. And there are ways in which you can absolutely shape the future for the better. You can be creative. You can do all the things you want to within that. But there, as you say, there is that destiny. So I've had moments in my career where I've been totally loved up with my work, desperately in love with it, and others where it's felt like a toxic relationship. And seeing that difference between that and understanding that that's personal and that it is often within your power. So when Ben and I wrote Love Work, we spent some time with lots of different people, some of whom were effectively in roles that they would have liked to have left, but for personal reasons weren't able to. And they managed to reshape and restructure what they were doing in those roles, to reframe what they're thinking, to build habits and ways to love what they were doing even more. So the power of the mind, the power of what you can do as an individual is incredible when it comes to the influence you can have with your work outside it, but also it's incredible in terms of what you can do to make it work for you personally as well.
I mean, what a brilliant way to finish. And that was just an absolute joy to listen to you. I can see you're a ball of energy and you bring energy into everything that you do. And I think the Marketing Society has got a great leader. Now, we always end with a little fun fact. And I know that you have a great little story about a little bit of giving and a little bit of thoughtfulness with your balloon story. I'd love you just to sort of share that. And everybody's now wondering, what the heck is she going to say?
Oh, well, it's a bit of fun, and you do a warm-up exercise and you have to sort of share fun facts and things about yourself. So I often, when I do that, we do speed networking and we get people to give 3 statements about themselves when they're doing it. And one of mine that I will say is, Richard Branson gave me a balloon. And it sounds much more full on and intense than it is. As we all know, Branson is a fantastic balloonist. But it actually shows just something that happens when you're not watching from the best leaders. So I was very young. I was at school. I was involved somehow in one of those things where you have a balloon and you put your name and address on it and you send it off into the ether and see if anyone picks it up. And completely bizarrely, my balloon ended up in Richard Branson's garden. And he, or probably someone smart on his team, but that's fine because, he clearly had a culture where that was important, wrote to me to say, thank you so much. We found your balloon. We found your address. Here's a little gift from us. So I was the recipient of lots of different balloons, all which said Virgin on them, which as a young child was slightly problematic. But it was still brilliant to see a small act of generosity, which has always warmly inclined me towards Branson and everything he does, because clearly he was smart enough to say, this has happened. I'm going to go and make somebody's day by replying to this child. And I think there are so many examples out there of people who are incredibly successful in business, but who are also thoughtful humans, who are interested in ways in which they give back to society. Examples of that, and like to showcase and share the humans behind business success.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much, Sophie. That was awesome to talk to you. And I wish you every success with your 40th awards. And thank you. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pie and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpie.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.